Hi everyone, welcome back to Protect Your Farm Business with the University of Idaho Extension. I am Ashley Westerhold, an Area Extension Economist in Twin Falls, Idaho. Today I have an interesting topic that we get a lot of questions on as Area Extension Economists. And this is the idea of crop sharing, cash rents, and we get a lot of questions on what should I charge? Or how should I split a share agreement, or how to write one. And so today I just wanted to go through the differences between crop sharing and cash renting, while also showing you some resources that are online and available to you that can make this process a little easier. So you'll see in the description box that I have put the Ag Lease 101 website, which a lot of this information comes from that website. And remember to leave comments when you have questions. I will be answering them as I see them come up. And also, if you're watching this not live, please still leave comments. I would love to answer your questions, or feel free to reach out to me. And this will be my last week at home with you guys. So next week you'll see my office, and I can't wait for that. So on to today's topic of crop share and cash rent. And so what are the differences between crop sharing and cash rents? Well, a crop share is leasing cropland where the production is shared between the landowner and the operator. So other income items such as government payments and crop residue are often shared, and as are some production expenses. So crop share, you have equal, or it doesn't have to be equal, but you have a shared responsibility for the crops, for the expenses, so production expenses. The specific terms, the crop share percentage in which expenses are shared, will vary considerably across geographical regions and should be negotiated between the two parties. And so there's a lot to be negotiated when it comes to crop sharing, but we'll get into what the advantages are for crop sharing versus the disadvantages, and then we'll go into cash rents. So crop share advantages. So an advantage is that there's less operating capital by the operator due to the landowner sharing costs. Instead of the operator paying for all of the production expenses and then also having to pay a land rent payment, they would be sharing those costs. Management may be shared, and this can be in the advantages or the disadvantages depending on the relationship. But a lot of times it's really great to crop share with someone who's more experienced, that older generation. That way you're making decisions with someone who's made decisions in the past, which could be of a lot of benefit to you. Risk as well as profits are shared. So again, you're sharing in that risk. If there's a low yield that year, luckily you will be sharing that risk with the landowner instead of bearing that all yourself as the operator. So there are tax benefits with crop sharing. So there is special use valuation for federal estate tax purposes. Also, you allow the landowner to build Social Security base as income is subject to self-employment tax. And it allows the landowner to take advantage of expensing investments in capital. So it allows them to expense a lot of the things to help their income tax. So some crop share disadvantages. Landowners' income is variable. So like I said, you share in the production, you share in the expenses. So it is dependent on how the crop does, which could be a concern if you're in retirement and you want guaranteed income. So crop sharing could be a little more risky or riskier for you if you're in retirement and are looking for set income while in retirement. So a disadvantage is also that accounting for shared expenses must be maintained. So you have to make sure that if you had a 60-40 split, that the expenses should reflect that 60-40 split, which requires more record keeping and requires that you do better accounting because it needs to follow the guidelines of that crop share agreement. The landowner must make marketing decisions. So they are still making those business decisions. Joint management decisions. Again, can work out very well or not very well depending on that relationship of the landowner operator. Maybe the landowner and the operator, it's father and son, and they've worked together well, and so they would feel comfortable making those joint decisions. But if you are renting to a neighbor, maybe you wouldn't want to make the decisions with them as the operator and you as the landowner. Just depending on your relationship. So there's increased paperwork in record keeping. Again, I've talked about that. If you have a 60-40 split or a 70-30, it needs to reflect that in the books, which requires you to do very good record keeping to make sure that everyone's paying their fair share or receiving back their fair share of profits. So material participation may reduce Social Security benefits in retiring, depending on how much money you are reporting for income tax purposes. So cash rent. Cash rent, a tenant usually pays a dollar amount in rent. There's fixed cash rent, where rent is determined by rental rates of compared farms, depending on the productivity. And this is set in advance, this rental rate. When it is fixed, it is set in advance. Where there's also flexible cash rents, where rent is set after harvest and is based on actual prices, yields, and or production cost. And so that rent is actually very similar to kind of sharecropping, but in a different way. And so it's a very interesting concept. It doesn't work for everyone, but it is interesting to know that these things are out there and that there are different tools to decide if that is something that you would consider for your operation. So in cash rent, the landlord is not involved in the farm management decisions. So what are the advantages, which the last bullet point might have been one for you? There's less managerial input. If you are paying cash rent, the landowner has no say in how you operate. Maybe they did in the rental agreement saying you cannot till so many times. But this is something that would have to be discussed in advance, but they wouldn't tell you when you had to market your crop, when you should buy inputs, etc. You are making the management decisions as you are the operator and they're the landowner. They don't know what's happening for production. There's reduced potential friction. Again, if you are just paying someone rent, then you don't have to meet with them to make management decisions, which then could really have you guys butt heads. And so there's not that issue when it comes to cash rent. There's no concern over division of crops or expenses. You don't have to worry about the very detailed record keeping, as all of the production expenses and all of the revenues stay with that operator as you just pay cash rent. The landowner doesn't have to market crops, so that stress is off of them. There's no risk for landowners for yields and prices. So there's no downward risk, say if the yield were to be way below or the price. But there is also that upward where if prices hit a all-time high, then they would not receive any of those large revenues or profits as the rent was fixed. So income under the lease does not constitute self-employment income subject to Social Security, so you do not have to report that as income. The landowner is no longer required to fulfill crop insurance or FSA requirements. So if that was a pain in the landowner's side, they do not have to do that anymore. or at least not as much. So there are some disadvantages when we think about cash rents. It's very, very difficult to determine an equitable cash rent amount. And I'll get into a couple of sources that might help you with this, but it is very difficult to set a price tag for a cash rent. Change is difficult to negotiate. So if they wanted to change that cash rent amount, it is hard to negotiate. You are also saying what the opportunity cost associated with that land. The landowner may receive less net income than if they crop shared. Again, if those prices were high, a good price year, and the yields were good, then they would receive less net income than if they were in a crop share. There's fewer opportunities for income tax liabilities. So if you have a cash rent, you can't then use expenses on inputs on a tax return and say you knock down your income tax bracket because of all the expenses. Operator may not maintain land properly, so there is always that risk of you do not know what the operator might be doing on your land and if they're hurting it in any way. And so there is that moral hazard part of cash rent. There's no opportunity to build a base for Social Security, and there's financial risk of operator not paying. So maybe you did have an agreement that was signed, but if the operator doesn't pay, then you'd have to take them to court, which could be pricey. And so there is few risk associated with that. So I kind of described the differences between crop share and cash rent. And so with that, the next step I wanted to show you is this Ag Lease 101 website that I find extremely useful. And when people ask me questions, I usually direct them to this website. And so this was developed in the Midwest. North Central Risk Management Education Center funded this project to hold this Ag Lease 101 website. And so if you look at this website, and I'll go to full screen, you can see that the homepage, you have Ag Lease 101 helps both landowners and land operators about alternative lease agreements and includes sample written lease agreements for several alternatives. Ag Lease 101 was created by and is maintained by North Central Farm Management Extension Committee. And so I just wanted to show you a couple of things that they have, which is getting started. What is your perfect fit? What arrangement fits best for you and your operation? Or what has worked in the past? Well, my thing is that you should have these things written down. For anyone's sake, make sure that these agreements are written down. I know that in Idaho, a handshake is law. However, it is best to have things written down. So there's lease publications here. There are lease forms, and then we even have some worksheets, where there's a pasture lease worksheet and a beef cow lease worksheet. And so I just wanted to go into a cash farm lease form and just to show you what that would look like. And so as you can see, it's actually a fill-outable form, so you can fill it out online, and then you can print it and use it as your own template when coming up with lease agreements or cash rents with a landowner or an operator. And so it's just a really great starting point for those who are looking to make this a very good document and to make sure that it is very easy to access and very transparent when it comes to both the landowner and the operator. And that way that you can describe everything if there is an issue that arises, which I hope there isn't. but at least you'll have written documents available to you. And you can always refer to it if there is an issue to say, you said in the lease this. And so I just really wanted to show you that. And so you can have a farm lease for the land separate from buildings and livestock. And so just so you know, there's many types of leases that are available that could fit you. And hopefully this is a tool that you will refer back to. Again, it's in the description box if you're interested. Another thing that is very useful is Iowa State has a lot of leasing documents that they have available on their website. And so whole farm leasing, and they give Iowa farmland rental rates, which are from USDA. And so what actually University of Idaho Extension is trying to do is that in the next year, we hope to send out surveys to our producers to actually collect data on the rental rates, especially when it comes to our cropping system. So we know that rental rates or cash rents would be a lot different if you're about to grow potatoes on land versus wheat. And so we want to capture that because I want to show you what USDA NASS gives you as cash rental rates that they report. And we think that if we are able to expand into different cropping systems, that would make it a lot easier to know what people in your area are charging for rental rates, because that is one of the largest questions that we get as economists is, what should I be charging for my cash rent? So if you want this information, please let me know. I will also have it in the description box after this is uploaded after the live. But in Idaho NASS, so the National Ag Statistics Service, they publish cash rents every other year. So they had them in 17 and then they had them again in 19. And these are in their annual statistical bulletins. And so it's average cash rent per acre by county. And they break it out into 3 different sections: irrigated cropland, non-irrigated cropland, and then pasture. And it goes by north, southwest, south central, and east. And so as you can see, irrigated cropland, that can differentiate a lot. Again, with my example, if you're about to grow potatoes or sugar beets or more of a high value crop on that land, then maybe you should be charged a higher cash rent than if the land is only able to grow wheat. So both of them can be irrigated, but there is a different cash rent associated with that. And then non-irrigated and pasture. Well, again, pasture is not even broken out into irrigated versus non-irrigated. And so it's just very difficult to take these numbers and then maybe compare them to what you think is happening around you with your neighbors, what their cash rental rates are. And so we hope that the University of Idaho Extension can give out this survey in the upcoming year, and that way we know what 2020 rates are, as NASS doesn't report them in 2020, and we can look at it a little bit deeper depending on cropping system. So with that, I just wanted to show you guys a little bit of tools that can help you when it comes to deciding on cash rental rates, or how to come up with a lease or a rental agreement, which I just go back to this Ag Lease 101. Again, it's in the description box. I think it has a lot of forms that are very, very easy to use, and I think that it would be a great benefit for your operation or you as a landowner to protect yourself by having these written documents. So with that, I'll see you guys next week. If you could let me know what you would like to see from us, if you're interested in a topic, please email me. I would love to discuss it. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. And with that, I will see you next week. Enjoy the beautiful weather if you're here in Idaho, and hope everyone is staying safe and healthy.